Hey everybody, Gary Underwood here from Emerge Counseling Ministries. Thank you so much for listening to our ExEm podcast. Hope you find it to be an incredible, practical resource and encouragement to you in your own mental health journey and relationships. Here at Emerge, it is our heart to help people in crisis, whether trauma, grief, addiction, anxiety, depression, no matter what. Emerge seeks to help those in times of great need. So would you be willing to partner with us in helping people who are facing a crisis? A one-time gift of at least $50 to our Emerge Fund at emerge.org/give will go to help the next child, the next parent, the next family to get the biblical counseling and support they need without adding to financial burdens. Thank you so much for listening, sharing our podcast with your friends, and hopefully taking this next step of helping Emerge help people find wholeness and healing in their lives. If you're ready to help, please jump in with us at emerge.org/give and make your one-time gift today.
Welcome to the ExEm podcast. Here is your host, mental health therapist, Matthew Kanabe.
I am very hard on myself, dealt with severe anxiety.
And it made me feel like a monster. I didn't have the energy to care.
There was just nothing more but to face what I had been running from.
I'm already an anxiety-filled mess.
It's just love. Like, it just goes back to love.
Well, welcome back to the ExEm podcast. If you don't mind giving us a 5-star rating and or comment on Apple Podcasts right now, it just helps us reach a wider audience. We appreciate it so much. If you are listening to us on Spotify, you can rate the show with 5 stars. It just helps us reach and throw a wider net for those who are searching for mental health and faith-based podcasts. So today, talk about transformative power through truth. Our guest has experienced a lot of adversity and trauma in his life, and he shares that with us today. I know many of us carry bitterness or unforgiveness issues because of how we've been hurt by others. Our guest shows us how his faith helped him overcome one of the biggest secrets anyone can imagine. To share his story, please welcome to the show, Vaughn Fink.
So I own my own business. It's a drywall business. I'm married. I've been married to my wife for almost, I guess it's going to be probably 24 years here. I got 2 kids, 20 years old, a son, Vaughn, and a daughter, Lexi, who's 19. Vaughn's in the trades, and my daughter is going to college at Kent.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so we'll go back to, I think 2005 was a kind of a defining year for you. Your dad passes away. You might talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So my dad actually got sick in 2005 and then ended up passing away in 2007. He was my best friend. And I guess, now looking back at the funeral, he had a lot of best friends. I mean, because he was good to everybody in some ways. But when he passed away, it caused a lot of mental anxiety on my end, which spun off into like obsessive compulsive disorder, which I had when I was younger. And it forced me to deal with stuff. It just put me down a rabbit hole that I actually called Vaughnville with population 1, which basically was myself. And it's just like, I couldn't control the thoughts in my head. And, I'd cry myself to sleep in the closet and everything else. And I don't even necessarily think it was just my dad. It was just everything with work and in general, having a young family and then all the pressures of that. So,
did you suffer from any type of OCD type things prior to that? Or was that when you really started noticing that?
I had OCD when I was in 7th grade and my parents went and got me help. And back, I don't know, probably 35 or 40 years ago, that was probably the mental stuff was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all new to them. It was all new to me. I mean, it was to a point where I was, something in my head would tell me to, put, objects through my fingers. It went everything from that to touching stuff to repetitive, anything. I was a prisoner in my own mind. And it's just, I had nowhere to go with it. I mean, everything was so new, the medicine and all that. Yeah, I mean, I would beat myself up. I would, there's pictures of me with scars from me beating myself up just because things in my head would tell me to do it. So mine wasn't crooked picture thing. It was more, abuse and kind of torturing myself, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
But then,
well, for our listeners, Was there anything that you found or felt like helped you? Because I just know that OCD is such a rampant diagnosis, and many people suffer from it.
The thing that helped me the most, and this isn't a cliche, I mean, the doctor in 7th grade sitting in the chair told me it would never go away. I would never be able to beat it. And at that point in time, I had a decision to make, whether it was okay to give into this the rest of my life and live with it, or, try to beat it. And I decided even at that young age to give it to God. And between that, my mom helping me and my dad, I did get through it. And I woke up one day and it was gone completely. And it was gone for probably 20 something years until my dad passed away, and something clicked and it just came back. And it wasn't so much the abusive. It was more mental. It was more mental circus then at that point. It hadn't been the physical. It was more mental.
Are you still
stuff in my head
with that today?
I'm sorry.
Are you still dealing with that today?
No, literally again, I went to the doctor, and I'm okay with doctors. I'm not against them. He wanted to put me on medicine, and I was totally against the medicine. And whether that's right or wrong, I'm actually a believer in the medicine. I feel like it helps, but at this particular time, 17 years ago with my dad, I was not getting on the medicine, this and that. I wanted to beat it. And something in my head just kept telling me, don't take the medicine. Don't take the medicine. Let's beat this. And I got to a point where I would cry myself to sleep in the closet. And I couldn't drive anywhere. I would get lost. I didn't know where I was at. I mean, there was times, and my grandma passed away from suicide, and there's other stuff in my family. So I wasn't going down that road, and that's probably drove me not to. But it just became a point where it was either die or just, and suffer that whole my life, or literally give the keys to God. And when I say that, it's not a cliche. I promise it's not a cliche.
Yeah.
But I had to step off the cliff, and that's where it began. That's where the journey began.
Mm-hmm.
And then it helped me, obviously later you'll hear about my father and how it had me dealt with that. But at that particular time, I thought, why am I going through all this? Why is this? Mm-hmm. And, I read a couple good books, and I'm not a book reader. Mm-hmm. And I would go to the men's group and I would literally cling to the men's group. I mean, I'd drive there crying my eyes out. And when I'd leave there, it was hope. It was hope. It was more hope, and then slowly but surely it worked. It wasn't, I know some people get healed right away. They get zapped and it's like, okay, yeah, it's gone. My addiction's gone. For me, it wasn't that. I had to earn it. Mm-hmm. And, I'm now, reaping the benefits of it now, and I wouldn't change anything, but going through that was the mental side to me. It's just as bad as any other disease. I've seen it in my family. I've seen it. I've lived it, Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in my family now, to be honest with you.
So your father gets sick in 2005. 2 years later, he passes. You want to start sharing about what those next couple years started to look like and what life became?
Yeah. And again, like, okay, so everybody says there was his best friend. I truly really was his best friend. I mean, we fished together. We hunted. I mean, we went everywhere together. I mean, it was just, even when I was in my 20s, we were never separated. So I'm standing at the funeral home, and I didn't know how I was going to bury him. I'm the only son. I have 3 sisters. My mom's sitting there. My mom's now a widow at 54 years old, a young, beautiful woman who raised these kids. And it's like, where does life go? And I literally remember standing in the back of the church and said, God, just give me a sign of that's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And, this was the church that we were at was where I had grown up in a church. Again, 5 years old. This is kind of the connection here. 5 years old, in that church. So I come up and sit in the front row with my mom, and my mom looks at me, and, she was doing good. I now that I look back, my mom was just burned inside. She never let it out because she had a tough persona. So I looked at my mom and she looked back at me and she said, "Here's your Bible." I'm like, "I don't have my Bible with me." She goes, "Well, Pastor Bob found this Bible this morning." So I opened the Bible up as he started the service, and it was my Bible that I had lost when I was 5 years old. It was on his desk that morning. And right then I knew God was real.
Mm-hmm.
And from that time on, I mean, yes, I went through the trials and tribulations, but that was the beginning of my story of the healing process, of where that's where the testimony really took off, to where, wow, God is real. God is real.
And so it sounds like that was a pretty important time for you to really kind of develop that relationship with God because of what.
Yeah. And again, I always had a relationship with God and I thought it was strong. I mean, you know, and again, I did more than go through the motions. I mean, nobody's perfect, but yeah, but to step out and believe him and to really see that he was that, I always call him that, shrinks himself to that small to help me in that situation. But actually God is that big, but I always say small because I feel like he shrunk himself to say, okay, Vaughn's important enough to, you know, let's deal with him right there at that second. But right then I knew that I was dealing with something way more than just coincidence. And then since then, I mean, just stuff's happened to me that, and I could go on forever, but yeah, that's when I knew he was real. And that was the beginning of the you know, that's where I started to really trust him in my life.
Mm-hmm. And then you kind of go on, you go through your grief, you walk through that of the loss of your dad, but then things become revealed to you over time, years pass. Talk a little bit about that journey and then what happened with your mom. And
yeah, so after the first couple of years probably with my mom, I mean, we'd go over there and help her house. And I mean, I was busy with stuff, but it hit me, the mental end of it hit me. You know, like I said, the OCD resurfaced itself, and it was probably 4 or 5 years of it, of just grinding through that, you know, after, you know, it just slowly crept up and then it just got so bad. Like I said, I'd cry myself to sleep, this and that. And I kept thinking to myself, why am I going through this? Why am I going through this? And, fast forward to where you're talking, my, you know, he had been gone for like probably 14 years. And, we found out that my dad had another family. We live in Cleveland, Ohio, but he had another family in Pennsylvania, and you know, it was revealed through online that it got connected, and that's when I was really tested. Yes.
And so I know this is tough on. I mean, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and you shared some of your story, and you know, I want you to be comfortable, and you share what you feel comfortable sharing. But when you say your dad had another family, what does that entail? And whatever you feel comfortable sharing, what is that?
Yeah, I'm going to share it because I feel like whoever's out there, honesty is the best policy. And I feel like the people are going to hear this, including people in my family. I want them to know the true story. I want, you know, and I want to give the glory to God. But he would always snowmobile in Pennsylvania. And, you know, basically that's why he went up there supposedly. But little did we know that he, you know, and my mom always looked at it as that was my dad worked hard here. He had a company, so he would go there and hunt and stuff on the weekends, we thought, allegedly. It turns out he had a family. And again, this isn't fact, but this is me connecting the dots between me and the people that lived up there. So when I say this, I don't want to say it's 100%, but based on my timelining, everything growing up, this is how I see it. And I'm 99% sure this is the way it happened. You know, I think it started around 1986 there. So I would have been probably 12. My youngest sister would have been 5. So there's 4 of us. So there's a couple in between there. But he had a mistress up there, and I think it just kept leading every time he'd go up there. That was his fun. That was, you know, I think to him, it was probably more of just, you know, something on the side. I really don't know, but his life there was completely different than here. That I have later found out. But so anyway, 1986, he had this female friend. He ends up getting her pregnant in 90, 91, 92. So I do have a half sister, which is part of the reason I want to do the podcast, because I want her to know the story and know that she's loved, and it's not her fault. It's I know it's a part of life, but hopefully it can be connected. Anyway, she's born. That's like 91, 92, I believe. And, again, my dad didn't pass away to 07. So all them years, this is a secret that he kept. He would go up there. He would do, and again, I know people listening are probably thinking, well, how do they not figure that out? How does his mom not figure out? And to this day, I don't believe my mom knew. I'm sure she had an inkling, and she wasn't a stupid person. But she never let us know if it was true. Me personally, I think that she probably confronted him at one time. He told her never to bring it up. He was abusive to her early in the relationship, so that probably had something with her never bringing it up again, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. But talking to my half sister, Vanessa, we between talking to her and the people up there in Pennsylvania and in here, and I am close to the people in Pennsylvania. It's not like I see, I've snowmobiled with them, I've motorcycled with them for weeks at a time. So this is all, So anyway, he has a child with her, and he passes away. He tells everybody at the, on that side, the Pennsylvania side, nobody's to ever know about all this, and Vanessa didn't even know about it. My half sister, she didn't even know my dad passed away. It was through another family friend that just so happens that she did find out. So she wasn't even able to come to the funeral and mourn with my dad, which bothers me because she's just as much part of us as I am.
Yeah.
So that was anguishing. I know at that time, I believe that she was, by the time my dad was that old, and she had no clue. As a matter of fact, I believe, and I think she would confirm this, that she didn't even know. She just thought we were a family from another marriage from my dad. To her, that was her dad. He went to Cleveland to work. So to her, he was a good dad, but he was the complete opposite father here. Here he was a Christian, no smoking, no drinking, no nothing, as far as we in the family never knew about. When he was in Pennsylvania, complete opposite person. Drank, smoked, went to bars,
Wow.
So it was definitely a tale of two lives. And when I found out, of course I was upset and mad. But that's when I truly believed that I had gone through what I went through back in the early years in that faith with God of trusting in him, of, it soon made me realize what I went through that pain for.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it was to glorify him. And it definitely strengthened my testimony here.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what was going on when you guys were, I think you almost got like a tip that this might.
So I have a friend that I'd gone on a motorcycle rides with, and we snowmobiled with him with my dad. I mean, and so my dad, we'd go on snowmobile trips and everything together with these people from Pennsylvania, but they were under strict, orders to not swear. Now, keep in mind, I'm 30 something years old at this time. So not to swear in front of me, not to drink in front of me, not to do any, and certainly not find out about his other family. So all these people are locked in and honoring his side of the, and even looking back now, I mean, even when my dad was on his deathbed, I remember him saying, and he's like, I overheard him in the other room say to this gentleman, nobody's ever to know about this. Well, I thought maybe he beat somebody up or it was something minor. I didn't know. I didn't know that it was a whole nother family. So through them, so I continued the relationships with the people from Pennsylvania after my dad passed away because they became my friends. I mean, we'd go to Sturgis on motorcycle rides. Every year we would do a loop. Well, at the end, I truly believe that my dad's friend, Bob or Robert, he felt guilty and finally let me in, on it. Through Facebook, indirectly he did. He didn't directly say it to me. He kind of let the online do it. And, so that's where we're at with it. But that's how he brought the whole story about it. And then probably a year after that, we sat down, me, Robert, and I call him Uncle Joe. I was so close to him that we all sat down, and he basically said, ask me anything you want about your father. I'm going to be honest with you. And we sat there for 2 hours and I fired questions away. And right after left, he answered them, and everything that he was answering was right on my timeline, or, that's how we kind of figured out where most of this was. So to them, they didn't even know about us until, probably 5 or 6 years after the point. So they didn't really find out about us until like 96 or 90. We'll see, 86, 92.
So finding all of that out, I mean, I think this is so difficult. I shared with you, I've worked with clients that have had similar things when a loved one passes and all this stuff from the closet comes out that was deeply buried.
Yes.
How do you reconcile with that? And how does that then change the idea of even your childhood and the relationship with your dad? Like, what impact does that have?
Well, I think what I went through, that Vaughnville, which I called it, for them 4 or 5 or 6 years, and kept questioning God, why am I going through this? Why them go? Even though I was getting signs that, from God, with the Bible situation and everything else, I think that strengthened me to a point where when I heard all this, I had 2 choices to make. I could either be mad about it, and obviously I was very upset about it, and and I could go down that road of anger, and disgust, or I could, change the way I live, and not that I'm doing that kind of stuff, but I can be beneficial. How do I impact making my marriage better? How do I become a better father? How do I become a better friend? How do I become a brother? In that situation, I had a choice to make, and I feel like what I went through in them stages prepared me for this. Mm-hmm. And then obviously my mom got Alzheimer's, later here that you'll hear about, but, and I truly believe that was a blessing. My mom getting Alzheimer's, is stupid as that sounds. She never knew, none of this ever came to her. She wasn't healthy enough to even realize when all this came to fruition. She had already been sick, which I think was God's other blessing. Mm-hmm. But as far as for me, I mean, I was to a point where I respected my dad so much, I didn't even wear my wedding ring because he didn't wear his wedding ring because of work. I just never questioned. But that day that I found that out, I put my wedding ring on, and I told myself, I'll be a better, human for this, a better father, a better, better son, better friend to people around me, and to try to make a difference. And I truly believe what God did there did open my heart. And I've said this before, if you knew what was in my heart, you wouldn't give it back. Because I know there's a difference between happiness and joy comes deep. Mm-hmm. Joy is deep. Happiness is temporary, in my opinion. But truly, believe it or not, through this whole situation, I can say I had joy because of what I had been through and, making that choice.
Mm. So how has this affected the family? Your sisters, obviously your mom was dealing with Alzheimer's, and
I believe so. My sister and I'm almost 50. My sister, I think she just turned 49. And then I have 2 other sisters that are younger, maybe 47 and 45. It seems like there was a tale of 2 different lives. And if you interviewed all of them, me and my sister that's older, we would probably have the exact story. And now I'm finding that my younger sisters it's like a tale of 2 households, and it's bizarre, because they weren't as shocked as my other sister and I, which is, to be honest with you, I realized this probably to really in black and white, but in between me and you talking the last time, because I got to talk to my younger sister in a car ride for 3 hours, and she brought some stuff out. I was like, I had no clue. Really? Yeah.
How do you feel like it's affected them?
I think there's twofold to that. I think affecting my sister Missy, which is my older sister that's 48 or 49. When my mom got sick, she looked at my mom as suffering all them years, and she took everything to heart. She went in her protective mode of my mom. She wasn't separating. My dad was a separate entity from her disease. So to my sister Missy, she was a phenomenal caretaker, but she got to a point where she was almost going to get sick over it because she was so mad at my dad that she was trying to overcompensate for my mom, which bless her heart. I mean, it worked out well for me because she was phenomenal at it. But in the process, it almost, I don't want to say it almost killed her, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Same with me. I was able, obviously going through what I went through and in my faith, I made a decision to, obviously I was hurt, but I was able to separate my mom's pain from what my dad did to her and realize I needed to just let go and give that to God, as hard as it was. But, I'm a firm believer, like, you can't be on the fence. Like, there's no, okay, I'm going to give this to God, but I can't. Like, my vice is work. I have a hard time getting, I'm not perfect. I can't give work to, for some reason, if that's my hang up. But as far as like all this and the family drama, it's like I can give God the keys and let him drive. And for me, I was at a place to where I was almost, I almost had, he got me through it without, it's not that I didn't care. It was like I was able to separate my emotion and get done what needed to be done for my mom.
Yeah.
And then my two younger sisters, my one sister lives in Nashville, and, my niece and stuff had been sick. So she was dealing with her stuff, which God bless her, that was where she needed to be. And my sister Stacy was, in and out of places, but she helped where she could. Yeah. So, but it definitely was a tale of two families. And I never realized that was the case until, like I said, in between the last time I talked to you, that hit me in the face.
So Vaughn, I want to ask you something, and I'll cut it if you don't want to talk about this stuff. But I've been interested in hearing people's stories that have, a parent. Oftentimes, it's a dad who has this alternative life. Does this change your legacy of him or the times that you had together? How does it affect your view of your childhood and early adulthood? That all of this was kind of going on through the lens of a guy that you were in the beginning of our podcast going, this was my best friend. And again, feel free to, not have.
Yeah, no, I don't want you to, I want it to be raw, and I want you to put on there whatever you want. Cause like I said, I want to do it to glorify God. In the beginning, probably yes, but not for very long. I got to a point with it to where I tried to set, you go back and do that, but I look back now and I feel like if he didn't do what he did, I would have been right there with him. I would have been probably doing the alcohol, the drugs, so if he, the saying, do as I say, not as I do. I'm glad he hid it from me. And I think at a young age, he realized that I didn't tick like he ticked. Now looking back, things in my life that he did, I would question it. If I was a kid, I was like, okay, well, why does he act like that? Or why does he do that? And then as a parent, I look at it now, I'm like, that was no big deal. Like, why was that such a touchy subject with him? And now I know. So I'm able to live freer with my kids and my wife and not be as he was very protective of my mom. Well, he was protective of my mom because that's what made him tick. He was looking at women. He was doing all that, for me, it was like, I always looked at it like, why is he jealous? Like if you can't trust your wife and your kid, you can't, so it actually changed my life to where, like I said, I became a better father. I became a better friend. I would like to say I am. I tried to try to be conscious of it. And as far as it let me able to live a freer life to where now I'm like, okay, I was right. That wasn't correct what he was doing. But did it change his legacy? This is a guy that at the funeral home, I'm telling you, it wrapped around twice. That's how many people were there. He gave money to people. He gave money to poor. He gave money, but all that money, that was guilt. That was not for the glory of God. I mean, he may have thought it was, but he wasn't buying himself out of anything. All he had to do was repent. I mean, David says in the Bible, look at David. David lived in anxiety because of what he did. And it's like, if my dad would have just repent and been done with it and suffered the consequences, his life would have been fine. And I truly believe, and again, you can edit this, not edit it, but this is how, I've talked to pastors. I truly believe he had plenty of times to repent. And finally, God just said, enough is enough. I am going to protect the ones that are faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for him, his lie cost him his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, that's how I feel. And I just feel like God gives you chances to change. And if you truly do change as a human, and if he lives in you, that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I realized all that and the growth I got from all this, I'm like, okay, what he did was not right. It's sooner or later you're playing roulette. I mean, if you're, and I just think he just tempted fate too many times. And finally God said enough was enough. Like I said, he's going to protect. My mom was the opposite, faithful woman to the day she died. Even if she knew something about my dad, she wasn't cracking.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that her, I don't think it, with the diagnosis of the Alzheimer's and stuff, my sisters will speak for this too. I think that it contributed to keeping all this in,
Mm-hmm.
And him beating on her when she was younger, I don't think that helped. So I think there's contributions for that. And then it's like, we start looking back and it's like, now things are making sense of why it was the way it was. Again, if you talk to us, any of me and my sister, we had the perfect upbringing. It was the perfect middle-class family, the Finks, this, that. Oh yeah, it's great. They got stories, but you never know what's hidden under there.
Yeah.
So again, for me, going through all that stuff I went through after he passed away and God strengthened me, I wouldn't change any of that now. I mean, if you asked me that when I was sleeping in a closet in my bedroom and locking myself in there and pulling over to the side of the road because I couldn't concentrate, I mean, no, it wasn't fun. But, now I feel like God sharpened me to where even if I go into Chipotle and people are miserable to me, I just look through it. I'm like, they're having a bad day, or you try to kill them with kindness. It becomes a point where I've told my kids, kill people with kindness. It ain't, why are you letting them ruin your joy? If they have problems, it's not, God's going through all this. God allowed me to see inside of people. And, the pastor, that I used, where we go to church, I still go to church or sometime, like I said, I feel like if you opened my heart and seen what was in there, you wouldn't give it back. You'd be like, I want that. And for my dad, I look at it as, at the end of the day, I think that everybody, when they're alone in a room by themselves and they're sitting there when it's only them and God, I really truly believe they become a kid again. And it's not, whether you're in a biker gang or you're doing what my dad was doing, you got to answer to God. It becomes a point where they know what they're doing is wrong. They don't let anybody outside know what they're doing wrong, because that's flesh.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with the spirit and they're in the room by themselves or going to bed at night, they know they need to make a choice.
And so now, have you made a connection and relationship with your half sister? Has there been contact?
Yeah. And that's a good question. We seen her about a year ago. Now it's probably been 2 years now, where we met her. And then we were supposed to get together last year, and we had sick and COVID and all that. This was after COVID, but they got COVID again. So we missed that. But she goes to my dad's grave and stuff all the time. But I always said once my mom had passed away, I would make that connection. And again, I hope she's listening to this, or whoever's listening to this, because I just feel like for my mom, it was almost like I was cheating on her. Yeah. I wanted to be with my half sister. I want a relationship with her. I want her to come to events. I want her to see my kids. I want her to be at everything. My full, how do I put this? I don't want to, she's as part of my family and as my blood is the sisters that I have that I've known growing up. So I always struggled with that, because it was like, I felt like I was cheating on my mom, and my mom was such a loyal person. My mom was polar opposite of my father. She was, there's no doubt about it. Even when my mom passed away from the Alzheimer's, I sat there and smiled, because I know that she's in a better place. And I truly smiled. Number one, she was suffering greatly. And number two, I just knew that she was at home, whether my father's up there or not. That's God for to decide. But as far as my half sister, I want a relationship with everything else, and I always call it like the statute of limitations. Now that those are over, yes, I look forward to making those connections. And I also, this is part of the reason I've done doing the podcast, because I want, now that my mom's in heaven, and she doesn't want us to not see that person. You know what I mean? It's in heaven. This means nothing down here.
Right.
But to ignore my half sister would not be, we'll call her Vanessa. I don't want to say half sister. I feel like that's disrespecting her. I don't want to disrespect, I don't want to hurt a suffer from that. And just here's another thing. This is kind of a side note, but my name's Vaughn. You think you could come up with a little different name than Vanessa? It's a little close, don't you think? So there is a little bit of stuff there. And I remember even a couple times him calling my sisters Vanessa, and even my wife, she's been around so long. She's like, I know that she used to call your sisters Vanessa. I'm like, no, you're right. So I don't know how he kept it separate, Matt. I don't, somehow or not. And there's very few people. And again, I'm sure there's people out there that know about it, but he kept it quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, he would go to her basketball games and stuff. This is a 3-hour trip. It's not like it's down the, street 20 minutes away. I mean, and again, for Vanessa's sake, I want people to realize he did try with her, even though he did not do the right thing and he didn't, come clean. He did try to make it work in his own mind of, to Vanessa, he was a phenomenal dad, and he probably was. He was a great dad to us. Mm-hmm. It's just that connection there. He made a mistake. And, I don't want to downplay my dad as not being a good father or a good, because there's going to be people who listen to this and be like, well, I don't want to paint him in a bad light, because truly, if you look back, I guess he was probably, in his mind, he was doing the right thing, even though it wasn't. Sure. So to Vanessa, he was a great dad, and I don't want to take that away from her. And to me, I had great stories with my dad. I mean, I spent a lot of good times with him. I truly believe the guy made a big mistake, and his pride got in the way and didn't let him. He was stuck.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to go any better. I mean, and again, don't take this wrong and edit this if you want or don't. The best thing that ever happened to him, and he would tell you, he did say it, is he got cancer, because the cancer took away his anxiety, and there was a way out. In my family, my grandma committed suicide. My great grandpa committed suicide. My uncle committed suicide 8 years ago. So this mental stuff, it's a family problem.
Yeah. And
what I take out of this is I can help my kids. I can help other people. It's obviously a mental issue. It just now that I'm digging back, and that, even like you said, since I've talked to you, I've really kind of gone down rabbit holes of what made this guy tick, what made my uncle, move from Garfield to Maple Heights and change his name from Max Fink to Martin Fisher. Like, who does that?
The other thing too that, I'm thinking about is Vanessa, she lost a dad pretty young too. I mean, she was, you said she was born in the early 90s.
Yeah, to be 16 years old and think that your family was shutting you out from coming to the funeral, which we had no clue that she was even in existence. For her, she has to live with that. Yeah. And for me, I feel for her more. I feel like to her, she suffered more than us, and it's not fair. Again, she's a strong person. Anything that I know of her, and I've talked to her and stuff, she's a strong person. But like I said, part of the reason to do this podcast was to make sure that the story was out there and how I felt,
yeah, it's good
about her and about, her family.
I wrote in my notes that I need to ask you about the payphone story. Are you able to share that?
I was hoping you were going to put this in there. So I have a very good friend that I've known for 20 years, and I've shared my anxiety and stuff with him. Well, back in, between when my dad had passed away, in the height of this anxiety thing, it was probably 2000, because I think it finally went away in like 2013. So probably between 2008 and 2013, somewhere in there, it was a 4 or 5 year stint. It just was brutal. Like I said, sleeping in closets, never drugs or alcohol or anything else. And I think that was part of I never self-medicated. So to me, I had to get right in the right way. And there really was no choice if I wasn't going on medicine. Again, not against the pharmaceutical medicine. This was just my belief. This was at the time. The last step when I knew that God was real I truly believe in Christian's life, there is a point in time where when you cross that, oh my God, God is real. That one of them was the Bible, and then, like I said, after that, I had gotten sick and I went through these trials and tribulations, probably to prepare myself for what goes on, later with my dad. I remember taking my kids to see the Easter Bunny at the Harley Davidson shop. They always had this thing. And I remember that whole day just bawling my eyes out. I mean, and again, I'm trying to run a business at this time, beating myself up. I just couldn't get over it. And I'm like, God, somehow, some way, just give me some kind of sign. Just let this go away. It was sheer pain. And my buddy who I talk to every day, and again, this is two guys talking. So he calls me out of the blue, and I'm on the way to the, see the Easter Bunny. And he's like, Vaughn, I have something to tell you, and my wife wants me to tell you, and I feel weird telling you this. And again, this is a guy that's one of my best friends. So we could talk intimately, and it, was nothing behind it. Mm-hmm. He's like, and he's a younger guy. He's 10 years younger than me. So he's like, I'm in this, I had a dream last night, and this is my buddy Patrick talking. He goes, and my wife's telling me to tell you the story, and something's telling me just to tell you this. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, I feel weird telling you, but I'm going to tell it to you. He goes, I walk into this restaurant in my dream. This phone is just ringing. And he goes, he doesn't know that it's a pay phone, but by the time he's this age, his phone's ringing off the wall. And he goes, I pick it up, and he goes, on the other end, is your dad. And I don't even know how it was your dad. I only met your dad twice, but he goes, you just tell Vaughn, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. And he goes, and then your dad hung up. Well, obviously, whether my dad's in heaven or not, God knows how much I respected my dad. And that's what I needed at that moment. It stopped me in my tracks to where I was like, oh my God, God is
Literally
real. Like that moment. Now, again, it's what I needed at that time. It was like God put that in my life to where I'm like, oh my God, everything that I've ever been through and all this trust, like it came to that moment. And from that moment on, I was fine. It was like, and then after that, it became, a lot easier, and it left me from that point.
It's incredible.
And again, I told you when we had talked originally just a little bit here and there, with whether people want to believe my story or think I'm making any of it up, I assure you, word for word, it will never change. I've gotten, here's a couple other good, and again, put this in there if you want, put it in, but this is, I'm going to be real. My son, after my dad passed away, my son was 2 years old. To this day, he could tell you this story. You can interview him. Mm-hmm. He's seen something in the backyard. Papa's back in the backyard. Papa's in the backyard. Described to him distinctly, to a T, and then it just disappeared. And then we used to go over my mom's, again, this is an innocent child. God tells you to have, faith like a child. And I truly believe God brings this to kids because they're so innocent. They don't see the contamination in the world that we do.
For sure.
My daughter's riding on the riding mower with me, and we're going to, my mom had 48 acres, and probably out of the 48, 7 to 10 were grass. So my wife and I would go over there and help. Well, this was not a good day. And we're fighting and kicking and screaming going over there. And I'm like, okay, Missy, my wife, put Vaughn on the tractor with you, and I'll put him on the other one. We'll get the mowing done. We'll be out of here. Well, the whole time she's nudging me, my daughter, and she'll confirm this story. Dad, why is the man over there by the trampoline? Why is the man over there by the trampoline? Again, I stopped the mower. I'm like, there's no man over there, Lexi. What, she goes, I seen Papa. And then that was it. Never again. There was never any other stories. It was almost like at that moment, again, was it my dad? I don't know, but God puts God moments in your life to be like, okay, I am real. You just got to trust me with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as hard as it is to give the keys, I mean, I have this conversation with my son all the time. For me now, it's easier to say, okay, because I've had this, but he wants you to believe, he wants you to have the faith. And it does, we don't go through life at all. I mean, we buy houses. My wife and I, like, we're moving now, and it's the same thing. We said, if God wants this to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not, it's truly, if we get pushed back, we're pretty much done with it. We don't fight it because we know. So yeah, the journey has been, I guess, from the 5 years old to now. I guess you don't have to be on drugs and alcohol to have a pretty good testimony. But
Praise
he's
God
definitely handing him the keys is not easy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I always look at it as, okay, if I jump off a cliff, is he going to catch me? And obviously, he's caught me plenty. I do feel like I'm blessed now with my children, my wife, and everybody around me because of I've been able to give them the keys. And is my life perfect? No. I mean, nobody's is. And you're not guaranteed no trials or tribulations. And it says that right in the Bible. But
sure.
It's certainly better when I'm on your side. I'll give you that. I know that. And I've seen it. God's real. I mean, I can tell you stories all day, but no, those are two distinct stories, where I ask people now, like even my pastor, at what point did you know God was real? And I do truly believe when you give it to him, there is points you're like, okay, that was the moment. Yeah. I knew that he was real. Holy cow, this Bible makes sense because of this. And, so.
That's really good, Vaughn. I appreciate you sharing. I know these are not easy things to talk about, but they're so therapeutic. And like you and I talked about, you never know who's going to be listening. You never know what they might be going through. And to hear somebody you've gotten to such a healthy perspective of some pretty dark things, that I think brings people hope. So, Vaughn, as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share with the audience?
No, I just feel like going through the stuff that I went through with my mom for the 6 or 7 years. And she was only 70 when she passed away. Being a Christian with the Alzheimer's and all that stuff, and knowing now what I know, I'm glad I was at a good place and I went through everything I went through to be able to, when my mom passed away, it wasn't like, oh, my mom is gone. It was actually a celebration because I knew she was going to somewhere way better. And believe me, watching her pass away there was not, but knowing that God is good, how can somebody go through that if you just trust God? At some point, the faith is faith, right? Like if we knew all the answers, everybody would just put it on cruise control. And at some point you got to dig in and have faith and, and know that, allow God to do it. It's not, nothing's for sure. Even if he came down here today and said, hey, I'm God, they didn't believe him back in Bible days. So
exactly right.
They certainly aren't going to believe him today. That's why they call it faith. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, if I can impact anybody with what I went through with my father, my mother, or like my, the faith end of it, if it impacts one person, we did our job. And again, I told you I'd be real with you. Nothing that I tell you is stretched or anything. It's actually probably tamed down.
Well, Vaughn, I really do appreciate it and sharing these stories. I know it's going to bless people in our audience, and I really appreciate that. And really, really enjoyed getting to know you over these phone calls. Maybe at some point we'll meet each other in person. Who knows what God's plan is? But man, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
If I can help in any other way, please let me do.
All right, my friend. God bless you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Vaughn, for sharing what you have been through and even building a bridge to your half-sister to connect with her is awesome. I've been doing this podcast now for 5 years and collecting people's stories, and every time I am amazed at what God's doing and what we are capable of when we reach out for His strength, and Vaughn is an example of that. So we just added a new feature to the podcast. You can try it out and text the show directly. If you look at the episode that you're listening to and see the words, send us a text message, hit that link, and connect with the show. Please feel free to share how you've been impacted by maybe this episode or others, or questions we can answer on the podcast, or even suggestions for future interviews. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.